Welcome back, folks. Today's video is perhaps the most important one I've ever published on this channel, and the reason why is because there is a war happening within the GOP. The battle for control of the party in the post-MAGA era has begun, and I found myself right at the center of it here in California. But this isn't just about me. This is about who gets to define what it means to be a Republican going forward, who gets to participate in this party, and whether we're going to be a coalition that actually wins elections or an exclusive club of corrupt insiders who continue losing on purpose to benefit a consulting class that enriches itself by selling hope like snake oil to Republican donors across California and Los Angeles. So here's what just happened. Two major publications dropped articles essentially saying the same thing, that Groypers are now welcome in the California GOP, that there needs to be a vetting process to keep certain people out, and that I, Dennis Feitosa, am somehow an extremist figure tied to this movement. They are naming me directly. They are building a narrative around me, and what you're witnessing here is not journalism. It is coordination. It is a political effort to shape perception before they try to shape outcomes. And make no mistake, this is not random at all. This is part of a broader effort to sideline me politically before voters even get a say. Now let's talk about the smear itself, because I want to be very precise. They are using the label Groyper to paint me as an anti-Semite, a white supremacist, and an extremist. These are very serious accusations, and yet in all of these articles, in all of these quotes, in all of these statements, there's not a single example of anything I've ever said that is anti-Semitic. Not one clip, not one quote, not one post, because it simply doesn't exist. And I want to go even deeper into that, because people keep trying to box me into movements and labels. I don't belong to movements. I don't follow personalities. I'm not a fan of any political figure. I'm a fan of one, Jesus Christ of Nazareth. That's it. That's who I follow. That's who I try to model my life after. Not influencers, not commentators, not movements. So when people try to reduce me to some internet faction, it just shows they don't understand me at all and are truly committed to smearing me for their own benefit. Now let's also correct the record for a second, because there are straight up lies in both of these articles. They say I ran a Groyper booth at AmFest. That's patently false. I ran a debate booth. I created a space for open debate where people with different views could actually talk. We had several conversations, debated numerous ideas. We talked about the future of the Republican Party. We talked about the tension between different factions in the party. That's called politics. That's called free speech. That's called engaging with voters. And apparently now that's considered dangerous in the Republican Party. Since when did debate become extremism? Now, all that being said, we also need to talk about Elizabeth Barana, because she is a central figure in all of this, and what she's saying publicly in both of these articles is not accurate at all. Barana is the California GOP's chair of Jewish community engagement, and she has been one of the leading voices pushing these false and defamatory claims. She says she discovered me at AmFest, which is not true. We've known each other for several months. She has filmed at my podcast studio before. I have helped her with content in the past. We have communicated extensively. Not only that, she's been extremely complimentary of me in the past. And I'm actually even going to share some text messages with you, as well as footage of her filming in my studio so you can see for yourself. And that's what makes this even more revealing, because Elizabeth's tone didn't change until one moment. When I stood up at AmFest and said we need to build a coalition, when I said we shouldn't be pushing people out of the party, we should be bringing people in so we can actually win elections and the midterms. That's when everything flipped for Elizabeth. That's when the attack started. That's when I suddenly became overnight an anti-Semite and an extremist. So you have to ask yourselves, folks, what actually changed? Me or Elizabeth's political calculation? Because this is the core of the issue right here. This is not about anti-Semitism. This is about control. Control of the Republican Party in California. Control of who gets to run. Control of what ideas are allowed in the party. There is a clear divide happening right now between an America First vision of the party and an establishment wing that wants to tightly manage who is allowed into the party and who is not. And I said something very simple at AmFest to Elizabeth. I said, we should build a coalition. And the establishment's response was, nope, we purge, which explains why they're now introducing this so-called vetting process, which is a thoroughly dangerous precedent to set. The moment a party starts vetting candidates based on ideology instead of letting voters decide for themselves, you're no longer a grassroots movement that actually represents the public. You're an institution protecting itself and its money and interests. And what they're really doing is pushing out a whole generation of young conservatives, especially young conservative men who don't align with this corrupt establishment. Now, let's start with something people need to understand about who is actually leading this charge. Who is the establishment? Because that part matters. Many of the people pushing this narrative, pushing this vetting process, were never Trumpers not that long ago. They opposed Trump. They rejected his movement. They fought against what millions of voters clearly wanted. And now suddenly they're all aligned with Trump. And you have to ask yourselves why. Because it's not about principles, it's clearly about control. And let's be honest about what this faction actually is. These are largely neocons. These are war hawks. These are people who never put America first in the first place. These are largely Israel first voices who consistently prioritize foreign interests over the interests of ordinary Americans. And these are the same people pushing escalation right now, including toward direct involvement with Iran, policies that could send your sons and daughters into another foreign war that does not directly serve the American people. They support prolonged engagement abroad, not restraint, and they move us away from the foreign policy rooted in the Roosevelt Doctrine, precise, decisive action when necessary, not endless, drawn-out conflicts, especially in the Middle East. Instead, these war hawks push sustained foreign entanglements. And part of how they justify that is by taking a political ideology like Zionism and tying it to theological interpretations in a way that pressures and divides Christians, framing foreign policy decisions as moral obligations instead of strategic ones, and building support for conflicts that many Americans do not actually want. These are the people driving this. And that should raise serious questions about what's actually behind this effort to ostracize America First candidates. Now, all that being said, let's take a second and look at the tactics being used by this establishment, because this is something people are going to recognize. What you're seeing right now is the same playbook the left has been using for years. Take a broad, vague label, load it up with the worst possible associations, and then apply it to anyone who steps out of the party line. Groyper is being used the same way the left uses terms like Nazi or extremist, not as a precise definition, but as a weapon to shut down debate and discredit people without engaging with what they're actually saying. And the reason this feels familiar is because it is familiar. The California GOP has been heavily influenced by people who came out of that same political culture. Former Democrats, consultant class operatives, people who ran in circles that overlap with the DSA and the broader left. You've got people in leadership positions in the GOP who are pro-abortion, pro-LGBT ideology, and who have no real connection to the traditional conservative base of the Republican Party. And what they've built is a consultant-driven machine that runs losing candidates cycle after cycle, raises money off of donors, many of them well-meaning, and then delivers nothing. It's a perpetual losing model. And now they're trying to protect that model by pushing out anyone who threatens it. Now, we also should define what they're actually calling groyperism, because this is where it really starts to fall apart, their whole argumentation. If you look at their own memo, their own language, what they're really targeting is anything that even moderately resembles America First. They're saying that candidates who promote those ideas should be avoided, removed, or scrutinized. But let's be clear, America First is not some fringe ideology. That idea goes back decades. It was championed by people like Pat Buchanan long before Trump ever even ran for office. And it became central to Trump's 2015 campaign because it resonated with millions of Americans. And here's the irony. This is an American political party, the Republican Party, openly signaling that it does not support America First policies. These people are literally saying the quiet part out loud. They're telling you directly that they are not America First. So if you feel like the government stopped putting you first, if you feel like our domestic priorities, our economy, our communities, our standard of living has taken a back seat to foreign policy decisions that don't benefit you, well, guess what? They don't want you in the party. And that's where this divide becomes even clearer, because you have a faction in this party that's not America First. They are Israel First. These are the people pushing out the America First candidates and the America First faction. Their priorities are not aligned with the average American voter. And that's part of why there's such a tension on the right now. All that being said, if this Israel First establishment is claiming that groyperism is simply putting America first, then yes, I am proudly America First. I will proudly say that. And I will also say this. I support Americans who believe in that America First principle. Whether they're Groypers, whether they're Reagan conservatives, whether they're part of any group or none at all, regardless of their ethnic, religious, or personal background. And not only do I support these America First folks, I will represent them and their interests because I believe in this country. And I believe in putting this country first ahead of every other country. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting because even their own article admits something very important. They cannot stop anyone from running for office. They can't. That's the law. If you qualify for the ballot, you're on the ballot, period. The voters decide, not party insiders. So what are they doing instead? They're withholding endorsements. They're recruiting candidates to run against people they don't like. They're coordinating messaging to smear candidates before voters even hear from them. This is not about protecting the party. This is about controlling outcomes. And let's take a moment then to talk about my race specifically because they're trying to rewrite that too. They say that the party refused to endorse me. That's not what actually happened. The party didn't endorse anyone in my race in Congressional District 30. That means the candidate they recruited didn't get the endorsement either. Behind the scenes, there was a coordinated effort to slander me leading up to the endorsement meeting. Elizabeth and others on the LA GOP board were calling members of the party, spreading the false narrative that I'm an anti-Semite, and actively pushing party members to vote on the candidate they recruited to run against me. And even with all of that, even with the avalanche of smears and internal pressure in the party and the coordination, they still couldn't secure the 2/3 majority needed to get their candidate endorsed. And that should tell you everything you need to know about how hated these people are within this party, how they represent a micro faction in this party, and they are desperate to hold on to control. Now, could they try to override that endorsement process later? Perhaps. Because too often they only respect the rules when it benefits them. But that's exactly what we're going to change. This is how utterly corrupt these people are. They don't care about the voters. They don't care about representation. They care about holding on to their consultant-driven machine, profiting off a cycle of losing while pretending to offer solutions to voters when actually offering none. Now, allow me to also take a moment and define myself clearly because I'm not going to let other people do it for me. I'm a 41-year-old entrepreneur. I'm a first-generation American with an immigrant backstory. I was born in New Jersey, but I was raised in Brazil. My background is Brazilian, Italian, and Portuguese. I'm not even considered white by most of the people throwing these accusations around. I chose to be here because I believe in this country. I didn't come here, build a business, and step into public life just to be falsely labeled and pushed out of the party for having independent views. I'm a conservative, and I believe in America First principles. That's it. That's the lane that I'm in. And I support people who love this country. I support people who want to put America first. And I'll say this very clearly. I may not subscribe to labels, but every single Groyper I've ever met has been a patriot, and I support patriots who love this country. I support people who want strong communities, a strong economy, and a government that actually works for its citizens. I represent the party of Lincoln, the party of Teddy Roosevelt, a party rooted in strength, independence, and American sovereignty, not a party controlled by gatekeepers who decide who's allowed to participate in politics and who isn't. So all that being said, you have to ask yourselves, folks, why is Elizabeth lying? Why misinterpret how we met? Why smear me without evidence? Why recruit someone to run against me behind the scenes? Well, the answer is simple. They can't beat my argument. They can't win on ideas, so they try to win on smears. They try to win through exclusion. They try to control the field instead of actually competing in it, instead of actually providing policy to the voters. But here's a bigger picture, because this goes far beyond me. If they can do this to me, they can do this to anyone. All it takes is for you to step out of line, question anything, or even challenge the establishment, and suddenly you're labeled, you're smeared, and you're pushed out. And that's not how a healthy political party functions. That's how a party collapses. And I think it goes without saying that after all the smears, all the accusations, they still can't show a single anti-Semitic thing that I've ever said. Not one. I've been a public figure for years. I've done comedy. I've done hundreds of jokes, some of them edgy, some of them provocative, some of them unfunny. And that's not policy. That's not belief. That's just humor. And the idea that people in the Republican Party, the party that has often aligned itself with free speech and comedy, would appeal to leftist tactics to redefine me based on unsubstantiated claims is exactly the kind of dishonest and frankly desperate tactic we're talking about here. If they had substance, they would argue policy and substance. But they have to rely on distractions because they have absolutely zero ideas. And they don't want to represent you or serve you. They want to subject you to their will and tell you who you should and should not be allowed to vote for. And that is inherently un-American at its core. I'm running for Congress in California's 30th district. That's Glendale, Burbank, Pasadena, and Hollywood. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not switching parties. I'm not backing down. I'm staying right here. And I'm fighting to fix this party from within because I believe the Republican Party should represent the people, not gatekeepers, not insiders, not political operators and consultants. You. It should represent you. And I'll leave you with this. St. Paul warned about people who are obsessed with disputes and arguments over words, people who create division instead of pursuing truth. That's exactly what you're seeing happening right now with the Republican establishment and Elizabeth Barkohana. You don't fix a party by purging people. You fix it by building something that people actually want to be a part of. I hope you join me in this fight. Let's put America first and take the state back. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you have a terrific day. Peace.